All right, part 4, we're going to be looking at the social reform movements as well as the Forgotten Four. Chapter 6 is kind of going over what was life like in Canada and many of the things that was happening and many of the things that were new in Canada. And the social reform movements were one of the developing ones. Well, what is the social reform movements? Essentially, it's people who started looking at the social problems such as people that were poor, that had no shelter, that had no food, substance abuse. So alcoholism was a big concern. Human rights, such as the right for women to vote, was a big one as well. And we have some great Manitoba connections to that. So the social gospel. So Christians were a big driving force in the social gospel around this time. And they believed that Christian values could be used to solve social problems like poverty and crime. The temperance movement sought to ban alcohol in the country, as it was thought to be a source of the world's problem. This is what was led to called prohibition, meaning you are prohibited, not allowed, to have alcohol. And so the temperance movement, which was primarily led by Christian men and women, sought to ban alcohol being made, ban alcohol being sold, and ban alcohol being consumed. So it was total prohibition. This went over well with some people and not so well with others. Nellie McClung was one of those social gospelers, and she fought for rights as well for the poor and for those that had no voice. Particularly, she was involved in the women's suffrage movement. It has nothing to do with suffering, but rather the right to vote. Can you believe around the 1900s, women weren't considered persons? Legally, at least. People knew that they were alive and they were humans, but in the eyes of the law, they had no legal right. And so they had no legal vote. And they weren't, because they weren't considered persons. And this kind of went back to an old British law that didn't recognize women as legal persons. Well, Nellie McClung and a bunch of women and men saw that this was a huge issue because 50% of the population was women. A lot of the great influencers, teachers, healthcare providers were women. And so Nellie McClung rightly thought that, well, women should have the right to vote since they are an important part of society. And so she fought for the women's suffrage movement, and through a lot of struggle, a lot of frustration, a lot of victories, eventually won the right to vote. And the first province that was able to vote was, ding ding ding, Manitoba. And so that's one of our famous connections to vote. And Canada was actually one of the first countries to enable women to vote. So good job, Nellie. Canada's Forgotten Four. And these were the Forgotten Four prime ministers because they were kind of on the lesser side of history. We've got Sir John Abbott, and his tagline is, "I hate politics." He was prime minister after Sir John Macdonald died in office, but he quit after 1.5 years. We got Sir John Thompson. Yeah, he was prime minister after Sir John Abbott. Unfortunately, he died when he was visiting the Queen, so hence he was one of the forgotten. We have Sir Mackenzie Bowell. He became prime minister at 71. That's when most people are already in their retirement years. Sir Charles Tupper. He was the oldest prime minister at 74 years old. Unfortunately, he was only prime minister for 69 days. I don't know if that had anything to do with his age. And those are part 4.